Hello and welcome back. I'm Shayna Sarcy and I'm so excited to paint with you today. So today we're going to do another page in our watercolor journals, and we are going to be doing a little bit of a study on hydrangeas. So I have been trying to grow hydrangeas in my garden and I've been trying to be patient for so long, but this year I finally got these big, gorgeous, beautiful blooms, and I cut a few of them to bring inside to show you. Look at these gorgeous hydrangeas, and these are all on, well, two plants, but some of them are on the same. But look at all the variety of color, these beautiful dusky blue ones, pink, purple in between. I even have these gorgeous, this is young still, so yellow and purple ones. So they're really just lovely. I'm so excited that they finally bloomed this year. All right, so, oh, look, got quite a bit of debris on my sketchbook page. There we go. So I definitely painted hydrangeas before, but large, loose kind of representation of hydrangeas in the full form. But what I'm going to do today is do more of a study on the individual flowers that make up the full hydrangea. So these are the tiny little flowers that are all bundled together, and I just pulled off one little stem of them. And I use this to kind of draw out a sketch so we can get a little more up close and personal. So we're not going to make a full hydrangea, but just getting to know the flower itself and the parts, and the colors and the paint. So that's what we're going to do in our journals today. So I'm definitely going to draw some out here. I'm going to grab a pencil. I just have a mechanical pencil here, and I have my kneaded erasers right here. And I did do a little sketch on paper over here. You can see that I'm going to recreate over here. And I used this little bloom. I kind of set it down and used my observational skills to create this sketch or drawing. All right, so first we're going to start, and I'm going to kind of go over here because I'm going to do a color, more of a color study over here to create the different colors we're going to use. So the first thing I wanted to do when looking at this composition was create a couple different views of the flower. So I wanted to make sure I had one that was kind of straight on. Sorry, my voice is very scratchy. It's early in the morning today. Actually getting to painting early on in the day. It hasn't happened in a while. So hydrangeas have 4 petals usually, and they're this lovely, they're kind of wide, and then they're pointed at the top, like wide in the middle. What's the word I'm looking for? Oh, like spade shaped almost. And actually this one I want to bring a little further this way. They're not always perfectly aligned with each other. This one is like pointed a little bit crooked in this direction. So I'm just going to scooch this one over on the bottom as well. And I had talked about in a video, like a couple of videos ago, some of the tools that I love that I have. And a light board is one of them for tracing. And this is a great instance where I would draw something out really firmly and kind of get all the erasing and the mistakes out, and then I would just put it on the light board and trace it onto the watercolor paper. But I wanted you to see how I drew these out. So, all right, so we have that one, and then we have a whole bunch of weird shapes. They're going to look weird, but they're just the sides of petals all clustered together. like if I held this way, you're going to see this petal, but you're going to see all these weird shapes around it for this cluster. So that's what these shapes are now. It's like the side of a petal, the back of a petal. You don't get to see the full thing, but it's like tucked kind of in there. And let's see up here. And then a few more out to the side this way. And this one we see another like little one of the buttons right there. The only shape I really don't like is this empty shape that I left here. So I'm gonna just fill that in even a little more. And we'll tuck another petal behind it there. Okay, and then, oh, it had like this little stem that it attached to the tree with, or to the, like the full bloom with. Oops, sorry to shake the camera. Okay, so let's get into our paints, mix some colors, and then we'll start to apply it to our hydrangea. All right, so I am using, don't forget to check out the description for links to supplies and materials that I'm using in this video, as well as many other supplies and materials I use regularly in other videos. I just keep them all in there in the list. This is a 6x9 Bao Hong watercolor journal, 140% or 140 pound cold press, 100% cotton paper. I am using today 2 Velvet Touch brushes, a 4 and a 6, my core watercolor paints in my enamel metal palette. The core paints are QOR by Golden, but again, you can find that link in the description. And I have some water, paper towels, and I think we're good to go. I might zoom out a little bit just because everybody really likes to see kind of the full setup here. It's a difficult balance to make sure you can see what I'm doing in detail, but also see all of the pieces or elements to the setup. Oh, there we go. And you can see my coffee as well, which does not have a lid on it today, so that's dangerous. I will do my best not to put my paintbrush in it. Okay, so let's move this down, move my water under here, my paper towel down here, scooch this up a little bit. So over here, we're gonna mix some colors. I'm just using my size 6 brush for now. Put that one there. Now you'd think I have a Dioxazine purple in my palette. Oh, just go for the purple because hydrangeas are generally purple, purpley blue. But I'm not gonna use that at all. I'm gonna use 2 of my favorite colors to make this purple. Just getting them activated, throwing a bunch of drops of water in there. And the colors I'm going to use are Quinacridone Magenta and Ultramarine Blue, or if you have French Ultramarine, kind of the same thing. Ultramarine is great because it's a granulating color. I think it's great because separation often takes place during the drying process when you mix your purples, and that's exactly what hydrangeas are. They're these combination of colors. Let's see if you can see in here. Like it looks purple like from far away, but when you look up close, you can see pinks down here bleeding into dusky blue purples, and there is a lot of separation of color in the actual piece itself. But then from far away, it all kind of comes together. And this ultramarine blue does that by the fact that it is a granulating color and likes to separate. The minerals in it are just a little heavier than the ones in the quinacridone, and as they dry, they create a little separation. So as you saw with the hydrangeas before, we also get a lot of variation in shades. of the different colors. Let me pull out one other bloom here. So these are two almost completely different colors, but from the same plant. So we have this very pinky and this very dusky purple color. So we can create that very easily when we mix our purples by creating one with more blue in it, like this. And then let's just add a little blue to this pink one. So now we have a very pinky purple as well. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is let's put some colors out here. So we've created this pinky purple color, and actually I should put the raw colors out as well. So I started with magenta. If you're swatching colors, you don't have to do circles, you can just do lines. I started with Ultramarine. And then this one is a combination of the two, more on the pink side. And this one is a combination of the two, more on the blue side. And that is how we're going to get lots of varying shades. And then also, you can go really, really light. We're going to play with our values, but for like the centers, they're very, very light. So we're going to do very, very light versions of these colors with lots and lots of water. For the highlighted areas, and then we'll be adding in layers to create more shadow. All right, I am going to lighten up this pencil line a little bit. And you could even do, like, as you're studying this, just do one bloom completely by itself. Let's do that. So if we did kind of the idea of a basic bloom with a center and these spade I'm just going to overlap them like this. And they're narrow at the bottom. They get really wide, and then they're narrow again at the top. So that's just one bloom, and then you can get rid of the lines in between where they overlap and decide which one is going to go on top. So we'll do this one on top and this one on top there. So let's start with this one. And I drew it pretty light. So I'm going to start with a really light value, and I'm just going to kind of do a wash. So I'm starting lightest, and then I'll build on layers to make darker and more saturated values as we go. You can play with wet on wet and wet on dry. So wet on wet is going to give you a much softer transition between colors, and wet on dry will give you more texture and control over the lines, like if you want them to stay in place. So there we go, and I've left the center kind of empty. I'm going to give it like a little hint of color on the one side, but I'm going to leave some white in there that I'm not even going to touch. All right, now if I want to do wet on wet, while things are still wet, I can add in some darker color towards the center. And these are drying pretty quickly, so it's turning from wet into dry. Which you can see these lines have stayed where these are kind of bleeding out. All right, let's let that dry for a moment. And then when you're looking at your little blooms, like it's great if you have an opportunity to observe this in real life. So if you're looking at your little blooms, you're going to be looking for the areas like around the edge. So the center is light, but all around the edge here, you see these dark little shadows where things connect to each other. That's what's going to make things pop. So when we start to add shadows right around the edges here, it's going to help connect things and make them look really interesting and more three-dimensional. And it'll start to make things pop off the page versus being kind of flat, you know, all one color. All right, let's let that dry and we'll come and finish it. All right, this is mostly dry. I'm going to pick up a little more pigment, so magenta and a little ultramarine. So I'm just making a darker version of the same pinky purple. I'm going to add a little bit more water to it. And now I'm going to switch from my size 6 to my size 4 because I'm really going to get in there. So I'm going to start adding to these edges so you can see how it starts to deepen it. And then I'm going to look at this and think, how am I going to recreate some of this texture? It's hard to see, I got sun coming in the window over there. Some of this texture here on the leaf. You may want to get like a detail brush if you have one, or a rigger, which actually I do. I have one of these little detail brushes around here. So you can add in some of the texture of the petal itself. You can even pop in maybe a little bluer color in there. But towards the center you want it to be kind of the darkest, which I'm going to pop in a little blue. And around where the petals overlap. So I popped in this blue. I want to retain the pink kind of nature overall of the flower. Adding a little bit more pinky purple. So this little detail brush that I'm using is just a King Art. You can see it's not in the greatest shape, but so this is more like a craft brush, but it was sitting here. I don't know why I keep gravitating towards these. I want to retain some of these light shadows in, or these light highlights in here. And then for this one over here, I want it to be darkest where it overlaps. And then we're going to apply this to kind of the whole thing here. We're going to do the same thing over here, but then we're going to have lots of different surfaces. So we're going to have the back side of petals. So that's when observation can be really great. If you're sitting something down in front of you and looking at it, observing it, where are the shadows, where are the light areas. that helps kind of walk you through the process. All right, I'm going to let this dry, and I'm going to start working on my other one. Okay, so we're going to start working on this one over here. Same principles. I'm going to go with the more blue, the purpley blue color. I'm going to lighten it up. Whoops. And again, I'm going to do a nice light wash on this center flower here, and then build upon it. This is definitely something you can take your time on, pause the video, or just turn it off after you got the basic instructions and just work on it. So like we have this nice layer down here. The back side of this one is going to be pretty light. But then this little dip in the front is going to be much darker. This one I think is going to be much darker along the edge. And again, your first pass down doesn't have to be your final. You can add and you can leave white spots too. This one we're going to start a little darker because I know it's going to go darker. It's kind of tucked behind. But you just want to make sure as you're painting, even if you're painting from imagination and not from observation, everything is not going to be the same exact value. And value means like the lightness or darkness of the color. How much water you've added, essentially. More water equals a lighter value, less water, more pigment equals a darker value. I'm going to leave some of those other ones around the edges there for later. And some of this you do have to wait for like a little section to dry before you can jump in and tackle another part of it. So be patient. All right, I'm going to do a little layering here. Go a little darker. Blend this out. Same over here. I'm still using my size 6 right now, but I'm about to go to a smaller brush. This one I want to be quite a bit darker underneath. It's pushing back a little bit. And this one over here will kind of be the lightest. Let's see what I do. Well, here's my size 4. And then in a moment, I'm going to have to let things kind of really get dry so that I can add some more contrast without it kind of dissipating on me and bleeding out. Doing my best to keep my hand out of your way. Okay, so let's let that dry. I'm actually going to tackle these other two little petals behind here. And these are lighter. Everything looks a little flat on here. This I'm going to take a lot darker on that edge. And like on this edge, I'm also going to take it a lot darker based on my observation of what's in front of me. These are kind of folding over into shadow. And then the ones behind it are popping out a little bit more. All right, I'm going to let these dry. And then come back and finish it off with some darker detail. I keep saying that and then I keep adding. Okay, let's let it dry. Okay, we're back and I am going to punch things up. We're going to get some really saturated colors over here. So this really dark purple. I'm also going to throw in, well, this magenta is good, and maybe a little blue on its own. We're going to use that with a detail brush. I'm just observing, like, in my flower itself, all these really dark colors. You don't see them right away, or shadows, until you really start to look. So I'm going to get these deep, dark shadows that kind of make everything pop around the center. And I'm going to take that detail brush, if I can find it. What do I do with it? How do you make brushes disappear? And start to pull out these little veins. And if you observe really closely, they're really delicate, but it's quite an elaborate network. And even on the center, there are these little lines that kind of come through, like everything is kind of pulling towards. Go. Gonna add darkest detail kind of right here where things overlap, and you can see as we continue to add contrast, it can feel really dramatic, but it starts to really push and pull things apart. So things that are darker recede into the background and into shadow. And it makes the painting more interesting. Makes it more three-dimensional, lifelike. I'm going to do more of a pinky color over here because I can. You can also take their leaves and study them as well. So this little petal behind here, I'm going to push it way back into recess. But then this one, the back of it, so this is the back of a petal, is going to have lots of this veining kind of coming up. We'll do this dark blue color. This is kind of the side. I'm going to get a little bit bigger brush in here. I want to blend this out. It's got a little too harsh of a line for me. A little more pinky purple over here. I'm going to throw a little bit of pink right on the center here. Just blend it out. It gives it like a little bit of a dusty pinkness, which I think is great. All right, so we're just about done. You can keep going on yours. If you have a hydrangea to look at, or even a photo of one online, could be really beautiful and helpful to observe while you paint yours. I'm just adding a little bit more pink to a few spots. And then this one, go a little more dramatic with the inside here, a little darker. All right, let's put our stem in the bottom, which is very purpley. Believe it or not, the stem itself is purpley, and then it kind of fades into brown as you pick up a little brown over here. Which warms it up a little, gives it that little warm touch. And there we go. Lovely. So then we do also have the leaves. I'm not going to include that in this video, but these are the shape of the leaves and the color. So if you wanted to start to look at those as well, I would use like a sap green and a green gold. So you could do a sap green, which is very similar. Looks very dark on here right now. Let me add a little water so you can see it a little better. So this sap green in core anyway is quite right for this, and could add a little Payne's gray to it. And then for the details, the highlighted areas, you could do a little green gold, which is a much brighter, lighter color. There we go. All right, so I hope you have enjoyed painting this little hydrangea detail with me, giving it a little study, looking really closely. And as you learn how things are shaped in smaller amounts and then you want to paint a bigger one, you can make it as detailed as this, just larger, but also just understanding the mechanics of how things are built and put together can help you when you go paint a larger version of it or a more complex version of it. So thanks for joining me. Don't forget to check out the description for links to supplies and materials. Like the video, follow the channel, or subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment. I love to hear them. And I will see you for our next watercolor journal page very soon. Take care, y'all. Happy painting.